A meal ended in murder. Welcome to Clue Law. I'm your host, Vale. Tell me where you're tuning in from. Your messages always mean so much. Let's begin. If you want to know how a pleasant Tuesday in the old brownstone turns into an invitation to trouble, the answer is, it doesn't. Not neatly, anyway. It begins with something that looks harmless in the morning and grows fangs by noon. That's the way of it whenever Nero Wolfe is involved, whether he likes it or not, and whether he admits it or not, which he usually doesn't. At 11:15, I was at my desk in the front room going through the mail, doing the part of the job that doesn't require leaving my chair. Wolfe was upstairs in the plant rooms, as fixed to his schedule as any clock in Switzerland, and Fritz Brenner was in the kitchen being Fritz, which is to say, performing quiet miracles with butter and heat. The house was in its tidy, stubborn rhythm. The doorbell rang. I looked at the wall clock and frowned. People who came to see Wolfe generally learned the timetable fast. Before lunch was not sacred, but it was guarded. I started for the hall anyway. If the world wants to disturb Wolfe's digestion, it needs to get past me first. The man on the stoop could have been a banker, a funeral director, or the kind of guy who sells you a second-hand car and makes you grateful for it. Mid-50s, careful gray suit, careful gray face, and eyes that were careful the way a safe is careful. He had a hat in his hand, even though it wasn't the sort of day that required one. He gave me the hat like a credential. "Good morning," he said. His voice was smooth but not friendly. Friendly voices are a choice. His was a tool. "Mr. Goodwin?" "That's what it says on my birth certificate, unless the bureau has updated it. Come on in." He stepped inside, took a quick look around the hall as if verifying that reality matched a description he'd been given, then turned those safe eyes back to me. "I'm prepared to wait," he said. "That's a splendid attitude in a client. But we'll see if you need to. Name? Garrett L. Voss. How do you spell Voss? With a V or a Q?" He didn't smile. "Voss, like the glacier, if I may sit. If you may breathe, you may sit." I waved him into the office. He went in like a man entering a room he expects to buy. He sat in the red leather chair opposite Wolfe's big desk. I took my own chair behind my desk, sideways enough to keep an eye on the door. You never know when a client is going to decide to bolt, confess, faint, or pull a gun, and I like to stay nimble for all four. "You're early," I said. "Wolfe is upstairs with the orchids. He'll be down at 11. I understand he does not alter his routine." "You understand correctly. You also understand that if you make enough noise, he might send me to throw you out." "I won't make noise." He lifted his hat to his knees and held it there, then looked at me in a way that made me feel like part of a preliminary examination. I was told that if I came without an appointment and asked to see Mr. Wolfe on a matter involving food, he might see me sooner. That was interesting. Most people got to Wolfe through money, ego, desperation, or all three knotted together. Food was a separate doorway, so I said, "Who told you that?" "A mutual acquaintance," he replied, as if mutual acquaintances were kept in a locked cabinet. "Mr. Wolfe knows him." That was a dodge, and I filed it away. "Okay, you're involving food. That's at least in the right language. Mr. Wolfe will be down in a minute or two. What's the matter?" Mr. Voss didn't answer right away. He looked around the office the way people do when they're trying to decide if the furniture is judging them. The globe, the books, the neat piles on Wolfe's desk, the chair where Wolfe sat like a Buddha with an appetite. The room is designed to make a man feel small without making him feel insulted, and it works more often than not. "I need a guarantee," he said finally. "You want a guarantee from Nero Wolfe?" I let that sit a second. "You're in better shape than most clients already. He doesn't guarantee anything except that he'll be hungry at one." "What kind of guarantee?" That earned me the smallest crease at the corner of his mouth. Not a smile. A structural adjustment. A guarantee that you will handle a private matter discreetly and entirely. That's the standard warranty. We don't do public matters at a discount. But you'll want to say what the matter is before you start shopping for ethics." His eyes flicked toward the door again. "A man waiting for a signal." He said, "I was told to speak only to Mr. Wolfe." "Ah, another specialty item. I can take a message, but I can't promise he'll listen to it." He opened his mouth to rebut that, then shut it because at that moment the elevator started to whine softly somewhere behind the wall. When Wolfe uses it, it's like the house itself clearing its throat. 15 seconds later, the door opened, and he came in, filling the doorway the way a grand piano fills a room. He was in his brown suit with a yellow tie, his face calm and unbothered, his eyes already mildly annoyed because a client had appeared uninvited. He crossed to his chair, lowered himself into it with the solemn dignity of a monarch taking a throne, and looked at Voss as if considering whether to have him salted and served. "Mr. Voss," Wolfe said. Voss startled. "Yes, how—" "Mr. Goodwin mentioned your name to me when we heard the bell. Proceed." That was Wolfe. If he wanted a man sweating, he didn't need to raise his voice or lift an eyebrow. He just rearranged the air around him. Voss swallowed once, regained his posture, and said, "I am Garrett Voss. I came because I have a problem of a kind that is sensitive. I am offering a fee for your services." "You are offering a fee?" Wolfe's tone suggested that Voss had offered to pay in dried peas. "That is felicitous. What is the problem?" "It concerns a dinner." Wolfe's eyelids lowered a fraction. If the word dinner could be a key, it had just turned. Voss took a breath and continued. "I'm the executive director of the Larkspur Foundation." That one I knew, not personally but by reputation. Larkspur was a glossy, philanthropic outfit that spent a lot of money doing good things in expensive ways and liked to have its picture taken while doing them. Wolfe said nothing. He doesn't interrupt a man who is digging his own hole. "Twice a year," Voss went on, "we host a private dinner for donors and selected guests. 8 people. It is a tradition. The menu is planned months in advance. It is important." "To whom?" Wolfe asked. "To the Foundation's work," Voss said stiffly. "To our donors. To me." "The importance of a tradition often exceeds its merit," Wolfe murmured. "What is your point?" Voss ignored the jab. He had practiced stepping around things sharper than this. "The next dinner is this Friday." I glanced at the clock. Wolfe's schedule says Friday dinners are usually Fritz's creations and not on Wolfe's tangency list. But he was listening. 3 days ago, Voss said, "I received a message informing me that if I allow this dinner to go forward exactly as planned, a death will occur during it." The air turned a degree cooler. Wolfe's face didn't change, but I could almost hear the gears in his head click into place. I said, "A death? You mean someone threatened to kill somebody at your little soirée?" Voss's eyes shifted to me, then back to Wolfe. "Not threatened. Informed." The message was not a demand. There was no request for money or action. Only a statement that one of the 8 will die at that dinner and that the death will be made to look natural. Wolfe's voice stayed unhurried. "You are certain it is not a tasteless jest?" "My staff is not given to tasteless jests." "Then perhaps it was sent by someone who is." "I have reason to think otherwise." He unclasped his hat, reached into his inside jacket pocket, and produced a folded sheet of paper. He placed it on Wolfe's desk with care, as if it might bite him. Wolfe did not pick it up. He rarely does immediately. He wants the other person to feel the weight of their evidence. I received it by courier. No signature. Voss paused. It contained details about the dinner that are not public, the seating arrangement, the wine pairings, the timing of courses. It even noted that the 3rd course would be served precisely at 8:30. Fritz might have said precisely about a soufflé. Wolfe's fingers twitched once on the armrest. I have not shared the menu beyond the planning. Circle, Voss said. 3 people besides myself have access to it. Yet this message knew it. Wolfe finally reached for the paper and glanced at it. His lips moved slightly as he read. I saw his eyes stop once, then move on. He refolded it and set it down. I will observe, Wolfe said, that this is written on expensive stationery. It is. The courier. I did not see him. My receptionist did. He wore a black coat, no identification, ordinary enough to be invisible. Ordinary is a description, not a person. Wolfe's gaze returned to Voss. Why have you come to me? Because I need to stop this without causing a public scandal. Voss's carefulness cracked on that word. If I inform the police, the foundation becomes a circus. If I cancel the dinner, donors withdraw support and the foundation collapses. If I proceed without preparation, someone may die. And if you engage me, Wolfe said, it is possible that no one will die and no circus will ensue. That is your premise. Yes. Wolfe's eyes narrowed slightly, not in suspicion but in irritation, as if the situation were a fly that had landed on his napkin. You assume I would attend this dinner. I assume you would not. Voss met his eyes squarely. I know your habits. I'm not asking you to leave your house. I'm asking you to prevent a death. I will pay your fee. And what fee do you imagine appropriate? Voss named a figure that would have bought a decent car and left change for gas. He said it with the same neutral face he probably used for quarterly budgets. Wolfe didn't blink. That is not a fee. It is a temptation. I intend it as both. I abhor temptation, Wolfe said, which was a lie that would have embarrassed a less magnificent liar. What are the circumstances of this dinner? Where? Who attends? At the Foundation townhouse on East 72nd. The 8 guests are myself, my wife, 2 long-standing donors, a chef we have engaged for the occasion, and 3 honorees chosen this year. Honorees for what? For contributions to our education initiatives. Voss was on safer ground now. His voice smoothed out. One is a city councilwoman, one is a tech entrepreneur, one is a literary editor. They are, in different ways, valuable to us. Names, Wolfe said. Councilwoman Lenora Rhine, Mr. Caleb Storr, founder of Storlight Learning Systems, and Ms. Daphne Quill, senior editor at Harrow and Pike. I watched Wolfe's face as each one landed. It stayed calm, which meant either he knew all 3 and didn't want to show it, or he knew none and didn't care. Either state was possible. And the donors? Wolfe asked. Mr. and Mrs. Trumbull, Hiram Trumbull and his wife Irene. They have supported Larkspur for 15 years. Your chef? Raoul Martin. That name did something in my head too. Not from a police blotter. From restaurant gossip. Martin was a celebrity chef who had gone quiet a couple years ago after some messy lawsuit about a partner and a vanished reserve fund. He had re-emerged, doing private dinners for people who liked their troubles garnished. Wolfe said, "So there will be 8 persons. You believe one will die. You do not know which one is intended to die, or whether the intended death is a disguise for another object." Voss's eyes widened a fraction. Wolfe had summarized his terror in one sentence. "That is correct," Voss said softly. The message did not specify, only that a death would happen and be accepted as natural. It said, "You will all sit at the same table. One seat will be emptied before dessert. You will not know which seat until it is too late." Wolfe's brow lifted almost imperceptibly. A theatrical mind, or an imitative one. Imitative? A man who quotes melodrama is sometimes merely borrowing style from another source. Wolfe tapped the folded paper with a thick finger. "Mr. Voss, there is a primary fact you have not supplied. Why should anyone wish a death at this dinner? What conflict lies within your circle of 8? Voss hesitated. It wasn't the kind of hesitation that comes from searching memory. It was the kind that comes from deciding how much truth is safe to release. "My foundation is in the middle of a transition," he said. "We are expanding. We are moving into contracts with the city and with private schools. There has been competition for influence, for appointments, money." Wolfe nodded once. "Meaning there are those displeased by your direction." "Yes, or by your person. Perhaps, or by the presence of the honorees." Voss's hand tightened on the brim of his hat. "Possibly." Wolfe sat back in his chair, the movement deliberate. "You have held something back. I do not object to reserve, but I do object to being asked to work in darkness." "I'm not trying to conceal," Voss said quickly. "It is simply complicated." "Complicated is my métier." Wolfe's tone went cool. "Speak." Voss swallowed again, and this time he didn't quite manage to reconstruct his smoothness afterward. 2 weeks ago," he said, "our board voted on a new initiative. Caleb Storr's company bid on it. The contract is large. He did not win it." I leaned forward a little. That was the first real nail on the table. Voss continued, "Councilwoman Rhine has publicly criticized our expansion. She's attending to be honored, but also to observe. She has proposed oversight measures I consider hostile." "And your editor?" Wolfe asked. "Ms. Quill has been investigating an old controversy involving Larkspur's founding. She accepted our invitation only after I insisted." "Insisted," Wolfe repeated. "Why?" "Because," Voss said, and the word came out like a clipped wire. "If she publishes what she thinks she has found, the foundation will not survive." Wolfe didn't move. I did. I sat back and whistled softly. Wolfe regarded Voss. "You provide motive for at least 3 persons to desire a death. Which death, however, is unclear. You might wish to silence Miss Quill. Mr. Storr might wish to humiliate or coerce you. Councilwoman Rhine might wish to expose you and profit by your fall. The Trumbles may have their own interests. Your wife may or may not share yours. The chef may have past grievances. A death at this dinner might serve any of them." Voss stared at him. "You think I might wish to kill someone?" "I think it would be foolish to exclude the host from consideration." Wolfe's voice was not accusing. It was clinical, a doctor naming a symptom. "Do you ask me to prevent a murder, or to prevent a death?" "Prevent a murder." "Then I must be paid to assume that a murder truly threatens. I need full information. You will provide it. You will also allow my associate to attend the dinner as my representative." Voss's eyes snapped to me. "Mr. Goodwin." "That's me," I said. "I'm portable." "There are security concerns. The guest list is meaningful." "It will be more meaningful if one of them dies," Wolfe said. "Mr. Goodwin will attend. He will be introduced as my emissary. If you refuse, you waste my time." Voss opened his mouth, shut it, then nodded as if accepting a bitter medicine. "Very well." Wolfe turned to me. "Archie, you will accompany Mr. Voss now. You will go to the Larkspur townhouse. You will learn everything about this dinner. You will meet the persons involved. You will obtain copies of the menu and the plan. You will also determine the limits of their access and what secrets they nurse." "Yes, sir." Voss looked as if he wanted to object to the speed with which his world had been reorganized, but Wolfe's chair had a way of making resistance seem childish. Wolfe said, "There is one more matter. When was the last time someone connected to your foundation died unexpectedly?" Voss blinked. "Unexpectedly?" "Do not be literal," Wolfe snapped gently. "I ask because this message suggests familiarity with death in polite company." Voss hesitated only a second this time. 4 months ago. Our former treasurer, Milton Hale, died of a heart attack. He was 59. There were no suspicions. Wolfe's eyes warmed a shade, which for Wolfe meant they froze. "No suspicions. Yet your editor is investigating the foundation's founding. A treasurer dies. A contract is contested. A councilwoman attends to observe. and someone sends you a theatrical warning. I felt the first real prickle between my shoulder blades. You can get used to threats, but you don't get used to patterns that begin to sing. Hale's name was new to me, but it didn't sound like a loose bolt. It sounded like a clue. Wolfe said to Voss, "We will accept your fee provisionally. If I conclude you have withheld material facts, the fee will increase." Voss's jaw tightened. "I have no wish to withhold facts." "Then you will not be punished." Wolfe's expression relaxed in a way that meant it had done nothing of the kind. "Archie will go with you. Return here at 6. We will dine at 7:15. You may leave then." That was dismissal. Voss stood. "Thank you, Mr. Wolfe." Wolfe inclined his head half a degree. I rose, slipped on my jacket, and led Voss toward the hall. At the door, Voss paused. His careful grey eyes had a flicker in them now, not quite fear and not quite guilt. Something that lived in the alley between. "Mr. Goodwin," he said quietly, "I want this handled without police, without scandal, and without unnecessary disturbance." I gave him my most obliging smile. "Sure, we specialize in minimal disturbance. But if someone's planning to die at your dinner, there's already a disturbance built into the entree. We'll just have to see who ordered it." He didn't like that. He didn't say so. We went out into the sun, and the brownstone door shut behind us with its usual satisfied click. On the ride uptown, Voss stared out the window. I let him stew. Clients talk more when they think you're not listening. After 3 blocks, he said, without turning his head, "You understand the Foundation is not corrupt." "I understand you want me to understand that. It is a good organization. Most organizations are good until you open the drawers." He turned then. "What do you mean?" "I mean I'm not here to admire the wallpaper. I'm here because somebody says one seat will be empty before dessert. So we'll open drawers, and if the Foundation is as clean as you say, you'll come out of it smelling like roses." His mouth made that tiny structural adjustment again. "Mr. Wolfe has a reputation for bluntness. I see you share it." I share a lot of things with Wolfe. Bluntness isn't even in the top 10. We rode the rest of the way in silence. I watched Voss's reflection in the taxi window. He kept smoothing his tie over nothing. A man doing that is either nervous or lying, and since he hadn't opened his mouth, the odds favored nervous. The Larkspur townhouse was the kind of building that tries to look modest by being expensive. Limestone front, black iron railings, a doorman who didn't smile until Voss nodded to him. Inside it smelled of lemon polish and money that had been laundered by philanthropy. As we stepped into a foyer big enough to park a conscience in, I was thinking about 8 people at one table, a plan that had leaked like a cracked jug, and a death scheduled between the 3rd course and the 4th. That's a narrow window, but narrow windows are what murderers love. They make everything look like an accident if you don't know where to stand. And I had a feeling, just a twitch in the nerves, that by the time Friday night rolled in, knowing where to stand wouldn't be the hard part. It would be knowing who not to trust when they offered you the wine. The butler met us halfway up the wide staircase, as if he had been posted there to intercept philanthropy before it tracked street dust on the runner. He was a thin man in a dark suit with a pinched, conscientious face, and he had the kind of posture that makes you feel like you're slouching even when you aren't. "Mr. Voss?" he said. His eyes slid to me. "Sir." "Henley, this is Mr. Archie Goodwin," Voss told him. "He's here on my behalf." Henley didn't blink at the lack of explanation. People like Henley have learned that explanations are often the first casualty of wealth. "Very good, sir. Shall I take you to the library?" Voss nodded. We climbed another 6 steps, turned into a long hall, and entered a room where the air was a degree cooler and smelled faintly of leather bindings and stale cigar ash. The library had a fireplace, tall windows looking down on the street, and furniture spaced like it had been measured by somebody with a ruler, and a fear of intimacy. Henley closed the door behind us without a sound. Voss stood there a second, then went to a sideboard and poured himself water. Not scotch. That was either discipline or a new habit. "You'll meet them all?" I asked, settling into a chair that cost more than my first car. "Not now," Voss said. "They'll arrive Friday. Today I can show you the plan, the staff, the kitchen, and I can give you the names of those involved in preparation. Those involved besides Henley, your wife, and maybe the house cat." Voss's mouth tightened. "There's a planning committee. 3 people. I already told Wolfe that. I'll introduce you to the one on site today. The others aren't here." "That's already a diversion," I said. "Wolfe asked for full information, and you led with the committee only after he pressed. Let's iron out the wrinkles. Who are they?" He didn't like my tone, but he swallowed his dislike with the water. "Mara Delancey. She's our events director. She's here. Also Dr. Paul Keswick, board chair, and Nita Rao, counsel to the foundation." And which of those had access to the menu, wine pairings, seating arrangement, and timing? "All 3. And me. And your wife." He hesitated. "Lucinda knows the guest list and the general structure, not the menu details." "That's a maybe. I'll decide after I meet her." I leaned forward. "About Milton Hale, your treasurer. Who replaced him?" "Mara Delancey assumed interim oversight until a permanent hire is finalized. Which means the money drawer is sitting open while everybody pretends not to look inside." I let him sit with that. "Who found Hale? Where did he die?" Voss's chin lifted, defensive now. "His apartment, alone. His assistant found him the next morning." "Who was his assistant?" "Elliot Fry." "Still with you?" "Yes." "Okay." I pulled out my notebook just enough to let him see it, not enough to invite him to censor himself. "Walk me through this dinner. Not the glossy brochure version. The mechanics." He took a breath. "The guests arrive at 7. Pre-dinner drink in the parlor. Dinner at 7:30 in the dining room on the first floor. 4 courses plus dessert. The chef arrives at 3 that afternoon. He brings 2 assistants. They use our kitchen but bring their own knives, pans, specialty ingredients. Our staff assists with service only. Henley and 2 servers will wait." "How many other staff in the house during prep?" 2 housekeepers earlier in the day. 1 maintenance man for lighting and sound, if needed." "Names?" He gave them, and I wrote them down, and I could feel him thinking he was doing his duty by bulk. But duty by bulk isn't the same as duty by truth. "What about security?" I asked. "We have discreet security outside, a driver stationed out front, and a private guard in the back hall to the kitchen." "That's in case a donor gets mugged by a canapé." "In case of protesters," he said sharply. "Councilwoman Rhine draws attention. So does Storr. Ms. Quill might. Protesters about your expansion. About politics, about education, about anything. We've had incidents." "Incidents like threats?" He started to answer, then realized I hadn't asked the kind of question he wanted. "No direct threat like this." "What about indirect ones?" Voss stared at me as if I'd insulted his tie. "Mr. Goodwin, you're here because I asked for discretion. I don't want this turned into a fishing expedition for dirt." I smiled. "Relax. Dirt is only useful if it sticks. I'm not collecting it for sport. I'm collecting it because somebody mailed you a warning using your own dinner notes as stationery." The door opened, and a woman came in without knocking. She was in her late 30s, slim in a way that looked more mindful than genetic, with black hair pinned expertly and eyes that didn't miss much. She wore a navy dress that said "professionally concerned" without going near subordinate. "Mara," Voss said. The word was clipped. "This is Archie Goodwin. He's working with Mr. Wolfe." Her eyebrows rose very slightly. Not surprise, but interest. She looked at me, then at Voss. "I see." Should I be worried? That depends on your hobbies, I said. If you collect poisonous herbs or read medical textbooks for fun, yes. Otherwise, you're probably fine. A faint smile tugged at one corner of her mouth. She had a controlled face too, but her controls were flexible. The dinner, she said to Voss. Yes, he replied. Mr. Goodwin needs details. Then I'm at your disposal. She sat across from me without waiting to be asked. Mr. Goodwin, I'm Mara Delancey. I oversee the event logistics. I nodded. Great. Start at the point where logistics became a leak. Who besides you, Voss, Keswick, and Rao, has seen the full plan? She barely looked at Voss when she answered. Only Raoul Martin. He insisted on reviewing the menu and timing in advance. He was sent a sealed packet 2 months ago and penciled notes came back yesterday. Yesterday, I repeated. You didn't mention that, Voss. Voss stiffened. It was routine. To you, maybe, I said. To me, it's a fresh pair of footprints. Mara, who sent the packet? I did, she said easily. From my office. It went by courier to his studio kitchen. He returned his notes the same way. Same courier service? Yes. Name? I can get it. Please do. And while you're at it, list every person who touched that packet in transit. I watched her eyes to see if she flinched. She didn't. Now, about the seating. Who decided it? She looked at Voss, then back to me. Mr. Voss did, after consultation with Dr. Keswick. We try to balance personalities, meaning keep the matches away from the gasoline. Something like that. Good. How did it leak? Mara spread her hands. If I knew, I wouldn't be sitting here. No flinch, no sweat. Either she was clean or she was very, very good. I'd seen both. I closed my notebook gently. Then we start with the kitchen, the staff routes, the wine storage, and the timing. If someone plans to make death look natural, they'll use the parts of the machine that people stop noticing. Mara nodded once. Voss looked unhappy, which told me we were already near something he didn't want illuminated. Let's see your machine, I said, and try not to leave any gears out of the tour. Mara led the way out of the library with a stride that wasn't hurried but didn't waste time either. Voss went beside her, trying to reclaim the feeling that this was his house and his show. I followed half a step behind so I could see both of their backs. You can learn a lot from shoulders. We went down the hall and took a side staircase that looked built for servants to appear without existing. The air changed as we descended. Cooler, more practical. And by the time we hit the kitchen level, it smelled like onions, steel, and the faint vanilla trace that always hangs around a well-run pantry. The kitchen was big, bright, and too immaculate for comfort. It had that staged cleanliness you see in magazine spreads where no one has ever fried an egg. 2 women in white aprons were at a stainless table trimming something green. They looked up at Mara like school children waiting for a grade. This is Amelia and Lords, Mara said. House staff. They handle prep for the house, not for Friday. That will be Chef Martin's team. Morning, I said. They murmured back, polite and wary. Amelia, Lords, Mara went on. This is Mr. Goodwin. He's doing a security review. Please answer his questions truthfully. That last word, truthfully, was a little gift with a barb. So I smiled at her and said, Security review is a fancy way of saying I'm going to be nosy about your workplace. I'm not here to get anybody fired unless they're trying to get somebody killed. Amelia blinked hard. Lords crossed herself so fast you'd think she was swatting a fly. Don't panic, Voss said sharply. His voice was for show. He was trying not to look like a man who had invited a wolf into his kitchen. I walked to the pantry door. It was solid oak with a brass latch and a keypad. This locked? Yes, Mara said. Digit code. Only the staff and planning committee have it. How many staff? I asked. Henley, the 2 servers, these 2 women, and the maintenance man. Plus me, Voss, Keswick, Rao. I held up a finger. You see how that list grows if you don't prune it. Everybody on that list is a possible leak. Everybody on that list is a possible meddler on Friday. Mara nodded once, neutral, as if possible meddling was a weather condition. I tapped the keypad. Code changed recently? Yes, Voss said. After Hale died. There was a microsecond of silence. I didn't look at him. I looked at Mara. Her face stayed smooth. We rotated all access codes in that period, she said. Standard practice when a financial officer dies. Standard practice, I repeated. Standard practices are where people hide crimes. Emilia, Lords, anyone besides your list ever in here alone. A delivery man, a courier, the chef on a visit? Emilia shook her head emphatically. Lords said, only us, and Mr. Henley sometimes. Henley ever in here after hours? Sometimes at night, Emilia said. He checked the locks. Alone? Yes. Anybody else check locks besides Henley? No. Do you like him? I asked, casual. They looked at each other. Emilia said, careful. He is correct. He does his job. That's not a yes, that's a survival sentence. We moved deeper into the kitchen. There was a wine refrigerator set into the wall with another keypad. I crouched to eye its faceplate. This for Friday's wine? Yes, Mara said. The pairings are already here. They were delivered last week. Sealed. Seals can be faked with a little glue and a lot of nerve, I said. Who opens these bottles? Chef Martine picks, Henley decants, servers pour. Henley decants at the table or here? Here, Voss said. Then this room is the last stop before a glass reaches a throat. That's worth remembering. Mara lifted her chin slightly. We've used the same procedure for years. That's also worth remembering. People planning mischief love routines. They don't have to invent paths. They just walk the ones you've already paved. She gave me that little corner smile again. She was either appreciating the logic or cataloguing it for later. I turned to the cold storage. Show me where Friday's ingredients will be staged. She opened another door. Inside were labeled bins, empty except for a few vacuum-sealed packages already delivered. Specialty items from Martine's crew. Duck breast, oyster mushrooms, truffles, something labeled only with a date and course 3. Course 3, I said. Third course at 8:30. Mara said, that's the fish. Any ingredient here that nobody else in the city is getting this week? Not yet. Martine brings the rest Friday. And brings his own knives, pans, and specialty ingredients. That's a loophole you could drive an ambulance through. I straightened. Where does he set up when he arrives? Here. She indicated a prep island. We clear the space. His assistants work at the far counter. He keeps his own kit with him. His own kit ever inspected? Voss frowned. Inspected. Checked, looked at. Not trusted by celebrity status alone. We haven't needed to. Friday you do. Voss opened his mouth to argue, then closed it. The man was swallowing arguments the way Fritz swallows pride, because it serves a necessary meal later. A sound came from above. Footsteps on the service stairs. Quick and light. A second later, Henley appeared at the kitchen door holding a tablet and looking as if he was about to announce a funeral. Mr. Voss, he said, your wife is back. She says there's been a call for you. Private. She's waiting in the parlor. Voss stiffened. A call from whom? She didn't specify, only that it upset her. Mara's eyes flicked to his face, then to mine. Mine stayed bland. Voss set his jaw. I'll go. I'll come, I said. He hesitated. It may be personal. Everything is personal right now. If someone rings your house and makes your wife upset 3 days before a threatened death, it's my business by Wolfe's order. Mara didn't say a word, but she watched Voss for a beat as if noting how fast he agreed. He agreed fast. All right, he said. We followed Henley up the service stair. I kept thinking about those sealed packages, that wine fridge, and Henley's night checks. A house like this runs on invisible habits. If you want to slip poison into a system, you don't smash the machine. You wait until everyone stops looking, then you turn one screw. In the parlor, Lucinda Voss was standing by the window holding a phone like it was something sticky. She was tall and stylish and had the kind of beauty that can be either kind or ruthless depending on the room. Her eyes were wide, her face pale, and when she saw Garrett, she didn't look relieved. She looked afraid. "Garrett," she said. "It happened again." He stopped dead. "Again?" She nodded, and her voice came out thin. A call, no number, the same voice. He said, "Tell your husband the dinner will proceed. Tell him one of you is already dead and just hasn't stopped moving yet." I felt my stomach tighten the way it does when the air changes before a storm. Voss stared at her, then at me, as if I could unsay what had already been heard. And behind us, in the doorway, Henley stood perfectly still, not looking at anyone, but listening hard enough to hear a pin drop in the next room. Voss recovered first, but it took him a second longer than a man like him would have wanted anyone to notice. He stepped to Lucinda, lowering his voice as if volume could bruise her. "Describe the voice," he said. She drew in a breath. "Male, not young, not old, calm, like he was reading something he'd rehearsed." Her hand trembled once, then steadied. "He didn't ask for anything. He didn't threaten me. He just stated it." "Did he say a name?" "No." "Did he sound familiar?" She shook her head. "No. And that's what frightens me. It sounded like a stranger who belonged anyway." I watched her while Voss looked like he was measuring distances between facts. She wasn't acting. If she was, she deserved an award and a better husband. Her fear was too clean to be melodrama and too raw to be decoration. "Henley," Voss snapped, turning. The butler was still in the doorway. He responded with that irritating serenity that makes you feel loud even when you're not. "Yes, sir. How long ago did this call come?" "Within the last 10 minutes, sir." "Did you answer it?" "No, sir. Mrs. Voss did." "Did you hear any of it?" Henley's eyes stayed forward. "No, sir. I was downstairs." It was the kind of answer that can be true without being complete. Voss turned back to Lucinda. "You did the right thing. Don't take any more calls unless we're with you. If the phone rings, let Henley answer." Lucinda's gaze slid to Henley. I caught the flicker there. Not dislike exactly, but reluctance. A hesitation you'd have if someone told you to hand a glass of water to a man you suspected of dirty hands. "Garrett," she said softly. "Are we safe?" "That's why I brought Mr. Goodwin. He's helping Mr. Wolfe." She looked at me then, appraising. A woman like Lucinda Voss had been appraising men since before she could vote. "Mr. Goodwin," she said, "you think this is real?" "I think somebody is taking real trouble to sound real," I said. "That's close enough to treat it as real." She nodded, not reassured but grateful for honesty. "What do we do?" "We keep our eyes open and our routines closed," I said. "If the caller wants to rattle you, he's already succeeded once. We don't let him succeed twice." Voss's jaw tightened. This is intolerable. "Threats tend to be," I said. "Tell me something, Mrs. Voss. Who besides you and your husband knows the dinner timing down to minute marks?" She frowned. "Mara, Dr. Keswick, Miss Rao, Henley, and the chef." "Anyone else overheard you discussing it? A friend, a driver, a stylist you complained to?" She gave me a flat look. "No." "Do you know Milton Hale's assistant, Elliot Fry?" "Yes, he still works there." "How well did you know Hale?" Lucinda's face shifted a hair. Not guilt, something more like distaste. "He was useful. He handled money. The board liked him. I didn't." "Why not?" "He was too interested in our lives." She paused. "Not romantically, administratively. He asked questions that weren't his business." Questions about what? Voss cut in. Archie. I kept my eyes on Lucinda. Just asking for context. The man died, and now someone's promising another death during a dinner he helped plan before he died. That's a context worth paying for. Voss swallowed the objection. Lucinda, we can discuss Hale later. She looked at him, then at me, and said, he was concerned about contributions, about balances. He hinted that donors expected certain things. He disliked Mara. He said she had her hands too close to the ledger. That was a neat little grenade dropped gently on the parlor rug. Voss stiffened. That's not accurate. That's what he said, she replied. Her voice was quiet, but not apologetic. I didn't say I believed him. Did he say why he disliked her? I asked. Lucinda shook her head. Only that she was ambitious. Ambition is a motive, not a crime, I said, mostly for Voss's benefit. But it can be a vehicle. Henley cleared his throat softly from the doorway. The sound was almost delicate, like a spoon against china. Pardon me, sir. Dr. Keswick has arrived. He's in the drawing room. Voss sees that like a lifeline. Good. Send him in. Henley vanished. Lucinda watched him go. When the door closed, I said, You don't trust Henley much. Her chin lifted. That is a strange question. It's my job to ask strange questions. She hesitated. Henley has served Garrett for years. He is loyal. He is also watchful. He hears everything. That's the job. Sometimes he seems to think it's more than the job. Before I could follow that, the door opened, and Dr. Paul Keswick came in. Big man, mid-60s, white hair combed neatly back, eyes sharp in a face that had played at geniality so long it had forgotten when to stop. He had the air of someone who liked committees because they let him be king without looking like it. Garrett, he boomed. Then he saw me. Ah, you must be Mr. Wolfe's man. The portable edition, I said. Keswick gave a smile that didn't reach his eyes. I admire Wolfe, but I'm surprised. Garrett didn't say the matter had escalated. Escalated? I asked. You mean the anonymous warning about a death at your dinner, or the brand new call to Mrs. Voss saying one of them is already dead and hasn't stopped moving yet? Keswick's smile froze. His gaze snapped to Voss. What call? Voss said flatly. Someone phoned Lucinda just now. Same voice as the letter. Keswick turned to her. Mrs. Voss, are you all right? Lucinda nodded once. I'm fine. She wasn't. But she was the sort of woman who understood that admitting fear in a room full of power makes people smell blood. Keswick faced me. What is Wolfe's approach? Right now, I said. He's at home thinking. I'm here collecting facts and watching people react to them, starting with you. He accepted that with a blink. Very well. Then give me your reaction, I said. Who do you think wants a death at that table? His nostrils flared slightly. The first honest movement I'd seen from him. That's an outrageous premise. So is dying between courses. He didn't like that either, but he leaned into it. If this is real, it is meant to intimidate the Foundation. We have enemies, political ones, commercial ones. Commercial, I said. Meaning Caleb Storr? Keswick's eyes tightened. Storr lost a contract. He has been petulant. Petulant enough to orchestrate a theatrical murder? Petulant enough to do damage. Keswick looked at Voss as if seeking confirmation. Garrett believes Storr capable of spite. Voss said, I believe he's capable of making trouble to regain leverage. Is trouble the same as death? I asked. No, Voss said quickly. Too quickly. I filed that and watched Keswick file it too. The board chair was smart enough to notice his executive director was sweating through his own script. All right, I said. We're wasting time in this pretty room. Dr. Keswick, I want a full rundown of the contract dispute, the Hale situation, and Ms. Quill's investigation. Then I'm going to meet your counsel and your assistant Fry. One of you is lying, and Friday doesn't wait for polite denials." The parlor went quiet in a way that wasn't peace. It was the hush before people decide which side of a fight they're on. And outside on the street below, I heard a car horn blare twice, short, impatient, like a signal. I glanced to the window. A black sedan was parked across the way, engine running, no driver visible. And on the dashboard, a white envelope sat propped where anyone inside could see it. It was the kind of thing you didn't put there by accident. Not if you wanted to stay alive. I didn't say anything at first. A man who shouts, "Look," usually wants everyone to look where he's pointing, and right now I didn't know if the sedan belonged to our problem or to one of those New York miracles where somebody double parks like it's a constitutional right. So I just drifted toward the window, casual as a house guest admiring the drapes. Keswick was still talking. Quill is a sensationalist. She has extrapolated from a fragment of correspondence and a rumor from 20 years ago. "Uh-huh," I murmured, eyes on the street. The sedan's windshield reflected the sky, but the envelope was plain enough. White, letter-sized, leaned against the glass. No movement inside. No movement around it. The horn hadn't been an accident. It had been punctuation. I turned my head slightly. "Henley," I called. The butler appeared almost instantly, like a stagehand waiting for a cue. "Yes, sir." "Is there any reason a black sedan should be parked across the street with an envelope on its dashboard?" His eyes went to the window, took it in, and came back to me. "None that I know of, sir." "Do you recognize the car?" "No, sir." "Do you know of any delivery scheduled for this hour?" "No, sir." That was too smooth. Not necessarily false. Henley was smooth by trade, but smooth answers in a jagged situation tend to annoy me. "Amelia," Mara's voice floated from the hallway. She'd come in behind Henley without anyone noticing. "Mr. Goodwin?" "Come on in," I said. She entered, took in the tense parlor, sized up the black sedan by the window without being told, and looked at me. "We've got a prop across the street," I said. "Either it's theater or it's a drop. I want it checked, quietly." Voss bristled. "We shouldn't make a scene." "We're not making one," I said. "We're preventing one. Henley, tell your guard at the back to step out and look like he's checking traffic. If the sedan spooks and bolts, we note the plate. If it sits, we approach." Henley hesitated a flicker. It was so small you'd miss it if you weren't married to suspicion. Then he said, "Very good, sir," and went out. Keswick stared at me. "You're taking orders in Garrett's house as if you own it." "No," I said, "as if somebody's trying to rent it for a homicide." Lucinda had edged closer to the window too, her composure back on like a tailored coat, but her hands were clasped tight. She didn't want to be afraid in front of Keswick. She wanted to know what was happening, give her that much credit. 2 minutes passed. The sedan didn't move. A man in a dark jacket stepped out from the alley side of the townhouse, walked half a block like he belonged to the neighborhood, paused to look at his phone, then drifted toward the car. He didn't crouch or tiptoe. He didn't look like a guard. He looked like a guy who'd lost his way to a coffee shop. He reached the driver's side, peered in, then tried the door. Locked. He leaned closer, read whatever was on the envelope, and looked back toward the house. He didn't look alarmed. He looked puzzled. I exhaled. If the envelope was a trap, it wasn't set to explode, at least not loudly. He pulled a small tool from his pocket, something metallic and flat, and slid it between the window and the door frame. The lock clicked. He opened the door and fished out the envelope with 2 fingers, like it might be damp. Then he shut the door, locked it again, and headed back. Mara watched him return, eyes narrowing, already pulling the puzzle apart. Voss looked as if he wanted to phone his lawyer and his therapist simultaneously. Keswick went still, waiting to see if this interruption would embarrass him. The man came in through the side door, and Henley returned behind him, expression unreadable. "Sir," the man in the jacket said to Voss, holding the envelope out, "car's empty, no driver, no key. Plates New York, clean." This was on the dashboard. Voss didn't take it. His eyes went to me. I took it for him. Paper is innocent until handled. The envelope was unsealed. No address, no stamp, just one word in block letters. Friday. I held it up so they could all see it. "Anyone want to claim this as a party favor?" No one spoke. I slid a finger under the flap and opened it. Inside was a folded cardstock sheet. I pulled it out. There was no signature, no letterhead, only 8 names typed in a neat, old-fashioned font. The guest list: Garrett Voss, Lucinda, Voss Hiram Trumbull, Irene Trumbull, Councilwoman, Lenora Rhine, Caleb Storr, Daphne Quill, Raoul Martine. The 8 seats, the 8 throats. Below the names was a single sentence: "One of these will not leave the table." I let the paper sit in my hand for a second while the room absorbed it. Lucinda made a small sound in her throat, quickly suppressed. Voss's mouth opened and closed like he'd forgotten how to speak without rehearsing. Keswick's face flushed a dull, angry red. Mara's eyes were locked on the list, not on me, not on Voss, on the thing itself, as if she could see fingerprints in the type. "This is insane," Keswick said finally, voice thick. "You see what we're dealing with, Garrett? A fanatic, a coward." "Or somebody who wants us to think that," I said. Voss rounded on me. "What do you mean?" "I mean it was left in an empty car across from your house in broad daylight. That's not a fanatic. That's a strategist. He wanted this found. He wanted all of you to read it together, right here." Keswick snapped. "To scare us." "To arrange us," I said. "Fear is one tool. Positioning is another." Mara lifted her gaze to me. "So what do you do next?" I pocketed the list, because if Wolfe has taught me anything, it's never to leave evidence lying around like hors d'oeuvres. Next, I circle one name at a time and ask where the pressure points are. This list tells us the killer's focus is the table. That means the method likely involves something consumed or experienced there. Food, wine, air, timing. Voss rubbed his forehead. "This is the dinner itself." "Yeah," I said softly. "It's not just a dinner. It's a stage, and somebody's already rehearsing." Henley spoke from the doorway, quiet as dust. "Sir, shall I call the police?" I looked at him fast. The question was the right one for a servant, but the timing was interesting. Like he wanted to see which way Voss would jump. Voss said, "No, not yet." Henley nodded. But his eyes dipped for half a beat, downward, away from us, the way a man does when he files information he can use. I turned to Voss. "We're leaving now. I need to report this to Wolfe. Tonight, when you get home, I want every scrap of planning communication gathered. Emails, notes, courier receipts, Martine's penciled markup, everything. No filtering. If I smell a missing page, Wolfe will smell the fire." Voss nodded stiffly. "And," I added, "put that sedan plate on your security logs. If it shows up again, I want to know before the horn honks." As we headed toward the hall, Mara fell into step with me. "Mr. Goodwin." "Yeah." Her voice was low. "That list, it wasn't just a threat." "What was it?" "A correction." She glanced back toward the parlor. "Someone wants the seating to stay exactly as planned. If you change it, you change the murder." That landed in my gut like a chilled coin. "Good," I said. "Then Wolfe's right to insist I sit at the table, because if the killer wants 8 seats fixed, he's going to be furious when a 9th chair shows up." Mara didn't smile at that. She just nodded once, like someone who understood chess. Outside, the late afternoon had turned a little grey, the way it does when the city is thinking about rain. I climbed into Voss's car, already turning the list over in my head. 8 names, 1 seat emptied before dessert. And now a second message. Louder, closer, not mailed to an office, but parked across the street like a dare. If the brownstone back home was a sanctuary, this townhouse was a trap being set in daylight. And I had 3 days to learn how it worked before someone sprung it. By Friday at 6:30, the brownstone had the same look it always has when Nero Wolfe is about to try a trick on the universe. Calm on the surface, nerves underneath. Fritz was setting out hors d'oeuvres with the saintly patience of a man who thinks murder is a regrettable interruption between courses. Wolfe had been in his office all afternoon, shutting the door only when Saul Panzer came and went through the side entrance like a well-paid breeze. I had spent the day doing my part, talking to Daphne Quill over coffee, sitting through a stony half-hour with Nita Rao, and letting Saul's results sink their hooks into what I'd already learned. At 7:05, Voss's driver pulled up. Voss climbed out first, wearing a tux that fit like authority and looked about as comfortable on him as a hair shirt. Lucinda followed in black silk and a smile that was the right shape but not the right temperature. 2 blocks later, a second car arrived with Hiram and Irene Trumbull. Hiram florid and booming, Irene quiet and watchful, the kind of woman who could buy your soul and still ask for a receipt. Then councilwoman Lenora Rhine swept in with the clean confidence of someone who had never had to say please unless she wanted to. Caleb Storr came last of the invited 8, rolling up in a silver coupe that probably came with a legal team. He looked like he had slept on anger and woken up refreshed. Raoul Martin arrived separately, carrying a black leather case I didn't like the look of, and an expression that said he didn't care whether the house was a charity or a mausoleum as long as the kitchen knew who he was. That made 8. And then, precisely because trouble prefers symmetry, the 9th chair arrived. Inspector Kramer. If you're picturing Wolfe springing out of his chair to greet the police inspector, you don't know Wolfe. He stayed seated in his office, and I did the greeting at the door. Kramer looked at the guests I'd already corralled in the front room with a face that said I'd been raising raccoons in a public park. "This your idea of a quiet dinner?" he growled. "I invite cops when I want people to behave," I said. "Relax. You're the extra chair." He didn't relax. Kramer never relaxes where Wolfe is involved, because his instincts tell him he's being manipulated, and he hates being right. I'd gotten him here the only way you can get Kramer to ignore the diplomatic fiction that this was a private matter, by handing him a copy of the threat list and letting him read the line about 1 seat emptying before dessert. He wasn't going to have a corpse on his conscience because Voss wanted to protect donor morale. Wolfe's voice came from the office doorway like a bell that didn't need announcing. "Friends, the dining room is prepared. We shall proceed." I herded them through the hall, Kramer grumbling in my wake. The Larkspur townhouse dining room looked like somebody had politely smothered a bank vault in mahogany and candlelight. White china, crystal that threw tiny rainbows, 8-place settings spaced with the kind of care that implies fear of contagion. A 9th chair had been added at the far end, and the way some of them looked at it, you would have thought it was a guillotine. We sat. Voss at the head, Lucinda on his right, Kesik's seating plan exactly as I'd been shown. Hiram Trumbull beside Lucinda, Irene opposite him, Rhine beside Irene, Storr beside Rhine, Quill beside Storr, Martin at the other end so he could be close to the kitchen. I took the new chair next to Martin and Kramer took the one opposite me. That put the law at both ends of the table and annoyed the killer, if there was one, in a way I hoped would be productive. The first course came out on time, carried by Henley, and his 2 servers with faces arranged like linen. Martin's assistants hovered in and out of the kitchen door. The conversation was what you'd expect when 8 people with their own agendas sit under crystal and pretend that death isn't on the menu. Trumbull talked about generosity. Rhine talked about oversight. Storr talked about innovative partnerships, in a tone that made it sound like he'd trademarked the phrase. Quill listened more than she spoke. Voss tried to be a host and kept failing at it in small ways. Lucinda smiled at the right moments, but watched the glasses like she was counting down to a bomb. Wolfe sat apart in his own chair in the corner of the dining room, not at the table. He had refused to come unless bribed with a shuffleboard trophy. He was physically inert, eyes on everyone, his presence a gravity well. I noticed Storr glance at him twice with a look that said he had not expected the big man to show at all. The second course came. The wine came. Henley decanted at the sideboard in the exact routine Voss loved because it made him feel civilized. I watched Henley's hands. It's odd what you learn from hands. Henley's were steady, competent, and just faintly too careful. He poured for Voss, Lucinda, Trumbull, Irene, Rhine, Storr, Quill, Martine, then Kramer, then me. 10 pours, 10 chances. He never hesitated. At 8:25, the air shifted. Not because anything happened, but because everyone could count. Henley and a server came in with the third course precisely at 8:30. Fish, as promised. A pale fillet set on a smear of something green, with a garnish that likely had its own passport. Martine watched its delivery like a general watching troops cross a bridge. I watched the plates. They served Voss first, then Lucinda, Trumbull, Irene, Rhine, Storr, Quill, Martine, Kramer, me. Nothing obvious. No fumbles, no switch. That was almost worse. We ate, slowly, because people who think they're under threat don't bolt their food unless they're trying to prove they aren't scared. I'd rather eat a boiled shoe than Martine's fish, but I took my time with it. At 8:42, Caleb Storr set his fork down. It wasn't dramatic. Just a quiet clink on the plate, like a man finished. He lifted a hand to his chest, frowned faintly, then tried to speak. What came out was a breath. His eyes widened at something he could feel inside himself, but couldn't name. His chair creaked as he tried to rise. He didn't. He slid sideways. Slowly, like a man easing into sleep. Councilwoman Rhine's hand shot out to catch him. "Caleb!" Storr didn't answer. Lucinda gasped once. Trumbull half rose. Voss was frozen. Quill didn't move at all. Her eyes were fixed on Storr's face in the same steady way she'd looked at me over coffee that morning when she was deciding how much to tell. Kramer stood, pushed back his chair, and bent over Storr. He checked pulse, breathing, pupils with the efficiency of a man who's seen bodies in the hundreds. Then he straightened. "He's dead," he said. Nobody screamed. Nobody fainted. Even good people go quiet when death walks in politely. But the silence was no less brutal for being composed. "Call an ambulance," Voss said hoarsely. "Too late," Kramer replied. Henley had drawn back to the wall. His face was pale. Not shocked, pale. Waiting, pale. Wolfe's voice was calm in the quiet. "No one move. Archie, close the doors." I did. The dining room became a box. Storr lay in it. Councilwoman Rhine turned on Voss. "You said this was nonsense. You said it was theatre." Voss had no voice. He made a small sound like a man trying to swallow iron. Wolfe said, "This is precisely why I'm here. Sit down, all of you." His tone was so flat that they obeyed without meaning to. He waited until the chairs were taken again, even Rhine's, though her hands shook. "Inspector," Wolfe said to Kramer, "you will delay the police response for 15 minutes. You can do that." Kramer glared at him. "I can't." "You can," Wolfe said, and it wasn't a request. "You will." Kramer's jaw worked. Then he said sharply, 15, that's it." Wolfe nodded. "Good. Now I shall speak. If you want to know why people sit still while Nero Wolfe runs their lives, it's because he doesn't sound like a man doing it. He sounds like a man describing something that already is. Mr. Storr died by a means intended to resemble natural failure, Wolfe said. The threats promised this. The method relied on the certainty that Mr. Storr would eat the third course at 8:30. It was not fish itself that killed him. It was what was placed upon it. Trumbull swallowed. Irene's eyes narrowed. Quill watched Wolfe now, not Storr. Wolfe continued. The instrument was a toxin that acts quickly and mimics cardiac arrest. Such substances exist. They require precise dosage and timing. They are most easily administered through food. Councilwoman Rhine said, "Then it was the chef." Martine exploded out of his chair. "No, I would not." "Sit," Wolfe said, and Martine sat like a man slapped by an invisible hand. Wolfe's gaze went to him. "You are not the murderer, Chef Martine. If you were, you would not have permitted your own plate to be served from the same tray." Martine blinked. "Then how?" Wolfe raised a hand. "Patience." He turned slightly toward Voss. "Mr. Voss, you did not wish to involve the police because your treasurer, Milton Hale, discovered that the Larkspur Foundation was built on a concealed fraud. The founding endowment was misrepresented. Donor agreements were falsified to produce tax advantages and political leverage." Voss's face went ashen. Lucinda's breath hitched. Keswick's eyes went flinty. Wolfe said, "Hale prepared a report for Dr. Keswick. He intended to confront the board, but 4 months ago he died of a convenient heart attack. His report disappeared from your files." Voss stared. I never saw—" "Because Dr. Keswick took it," Wolfe said. Keswick shot up. "That's preposterous." "It is accurate," Wolfe replied. "Hale told your wife he distrusted Mara Delancey because she had been close to the ledger during the transition. He also told her he would deliver his findings to you in the board chair. He delivered them, and then he died." Rhine's head turned sharply to Keswick. "You knew about this?" Keswick's face flushed with fury. "This is a madman's fantasy. Wolfe, you are—" Wolfe's voice did not rise. It did not need to. "You are not a fool, Dr. Keswick. You know that I had Saul Panzer review Hale's last week of life. Hale met you privately 2 days before his death. Your phone records show a call to him at 11:30 the night he died. And the autopsy notes, obtained quietly by Mr. Goodwin, showed a mild gastritis that could be induced by the same toxin that has just killed Mr. Storr." Lucinda made a small sound. Voss turned toward Keswick, the betrayal on his face so naked I almost felt sorry for him. "Almost." Wolfe said, "Ms. Quill discovered enough of this to threaten publication. She was invited here to be honored, but in truth to be contained. Mr. Storr, having lost the contract, threatened to expose the fraud unless you reinstated him as a partner. He was not subtle in this. He told Dr. Keswick that if his company were not given the initiative, he would go to the press with Quill's findings." Quill nodded once, coldly. He did. Storr had been a lot of things, but subtle wasn't one of them. Wolfe folded his hands. Thus the dinner became an opportunity. Dr. Keswick could eliminate Mr. Storr, terrify the others into silence, and preserve the foundation. He planned a death that would look natural, just as Hale's had. He leaked the dinner plan to himself through the courier chain so he could craft threats, forcing the dinner to proceed on schedule. Keswick's voice came out thick. "You can't prove any of this." "I can," Wolfe said, "because your plan required access to the third course before service. You could not do that openly. You could not depend on the chef. You required a conduit, a person who handles plates after the chef finishes and before guests eat. A person who decants wine, checks locks at night, and hears every conversation in the house." Wolfe's eyes moved, slow and precise, to Henley. Henley stood very still. Wolfe said, "Henley is that conduit." Lucinda recoiled like she'd been touched. Voss jerked as if to speak, then couldn't. Henley's face was pale now for a different reason. The waiting had ended. He was loyal to Dr. Keswick, Wolfe said, because Dr. Keswick has financed his quiet debts and promised him a pension beyond what your payroll provides. Henley accessed Chef Martin's sealed packet, copied the timing and seating, and delivered those details to Keswick. At Keswick's instruction, he injected the toxin beneath the fish garnish with a hypodermic needle concealed in his service apron. The toxin was colorless and odorless. It left no trace on taste. Mr. Storr ate it. The effect followed. Councilwoman Rhine's voice was a whisper. "You're saying the butler poisoned him in front of us?" Wolfe inclined his head. "Not in front of you. In the kitchen, moments before serving. You did not look where it mattered." Henley finally spoke. His voice was as smooth as always, but it had acquired a brittle edge. "Mr. Wolfe, this is nonsense." "No," Wolfe said. "It is inference supported by evidence. The needle was disposed of where a fastidious man believes no one will search, in the wine drain trap beneath your sideboard. Archie?" I crossed to the sideboard, opened the panel I'd checked earlier in a quiet moment while everyone drank their second-course wine, and reached in. My fingers hit cold metal. I pulled it out. A small syringe, wiped clean except for a faint green smear. Henley's eyes stopped being serene. Kramer moved like a reflex. In 2 strides he was by Henley, cuffing him before anyone else had cleared their throat. Henley didn't resist. He sagged, not from guilt, but from the relief of no longer carrying the thing alone. Keswick stared at the syringe, then at Wolfe. Something in his face collapsed. The anger drained out and left only the void. "You didn't have to kill him," Voss said, and the words broke on the way out. "You didn't have to kill anybody." Keswick's mouth trembled. "You don't understand." His voice was low, ragged. "If Storr went public, if Quill did, the Foundation would die, the scholarships would die, the programs, everything. Hale was going to ruin it for a moral crusade. Storr was going to ruin it for a contract. I wasn't going to let them." "So you murdered your way to virtue," Quill said, cool as marble. Keswick flinched. "You don't know what it's like to keep a structure standing," Wolfe said softly. "A structure built on fraud collapses eventually. It is not saved by killing the men who notice cracks." Kramer hauled Henley toward the door. "Keswick, you're coming too." Keswick didn't even argue. He looked old now, stripped of the board chair sheen. As they left, the room felt suddenly huge and terribly empty around Storr's corpse. Ambulance sirens climbed closer. The world remembered it had obligations. When the police swarmed in and the paramedics confirmed what we already knew, there wasn't much more for me to do besides keep people from stepping on the truth. Voss sat with Lucinda's hand trapped in his like he was anchoring himself to her. Trumbull looked like a man recalculating donations in his head. Rhine was already composing a press statement she could pretend she didn't want to give. Quill stood by the window, staring down at the street with the calm of a woman who had just seen her theory become a corpse. Wolfe stayed in his chair, watching the chaos without moving, as if the whole affair were a lecture he had ended early because the student finally understood the chalkboard. Back at the brownstone near midnight, after statements and sighs and the kind of paperwork that makes even criminals yawn, Wolfe and I sat in the office with Fritz's cold supper on a tray between us. Fritz, bless him, had assumed hunger persists even when justice intrudes. I said, "You were right about the lever." Keswick didn't just want Storr dead. He wanted Quill and Rhine scared into silence. Wolfe speared a slice of roast duck with delicate irritation. Yes, the threats were not necessary for the killing. They were necessary for the holding. And the 9th chair? I nodded toward where Kramer had sat earlier. That was to force Keswick's hand, wasn't it? You knew he'd still go through with it because if he didn't, he'd lose control of everyone at the table. Wolfe chewed. A man who has already killed to protect a deception will kill again rather than risk exposure. The extra chair accelerated his schedule. It did not alter his intent. "Nice," I said. We saved everybody else by letting Storr die. Wolfe's eyes lifted to me, flat and unreadable. We prevented a greater slaughter of lives, of prospects, of integrity. The choice was not pleasant, Archie. It was merely inevitable. That was as close as Wolfe gets to apology. I leaned back. Quill's going to publish? Some version, but now it will be a story about cleansing rather than collapse. Voss has a chance to rebuild without deception, if he takes it. And if he doesn't? Wolfe's mouth moved in a faint line. Then the foundation deserves to die. He cut a piece of duck, thoughtful. There is a human folly in believing that noble ends ennoble any means. It is not so. Appetite does not justify theft. Philanthropy does not justify fraud. And fear does not justify murder. He looked at his plate as if it were the only honest thing in the room. To preserve a dinner, Dr. Keswick spoiled every meal he will ever eat again. I couldn't resist. Assuming the prison food doesn't kill him first. Wolfe snorted, half amusement, half contempt. Your flippancy is your defense against despair. Use it prudently. Yes, sir. Fritz appeared at the doorway, asking if Wolfe wanted coffee. Wolfe said yes, because coffee is the punctuation he puts after unpleasant evenings. As Fritz left, I glanced around the quiet office, the old brownstone back in its rightful silence. Then I thought of Storr sliding sideways from his chair, and of Hale 4 months earlier, and of the way people can convince themselves that big causes excuse small crimes until the small crimes grow claws. I said, "Next time somebody invites me to a charity dinner, I'm eating at home." Wolfe didn't look up. "Next time, Archie, you will go where I tell you, and you will eat what Fritz provides. Even if it's fish? Especially if it is fish." His eyes flicked to me at last, and there was a glint there that meant the world had been corrected for the moment, and he intended to enjoy the correction. The last dinner that turned deadly is concluded. I propose that the next dinner be merely excellent. I raised my coffee cup in salute as Fritz brought it in. I'm all for excellence. Deadly takes too much paperwork. Outside, the city kept breathing and honking and pretending it hadn't just watched a moral edifice crack and reform. Inside, Nero Wolfe took his coffee, the brownstone held its peace, and for one more night at least, the only thing that died here was the last bite of Fritz's duck.